Many children want to be professional athletes. We know this, but it's not always that easy. Although I do think that there is one universal fact. The earlier they have access to legitimate training and coaching, the higher likelihood chance they have of becoming a professional athlete and cashing in financially. But when does early become too early? That's a question I think a lot about. Look at LeBron James, for example. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 16 years old and labeled the chosen one. Of course, he ended up becoming one of the greatest basketball players in history. But I think that makes it even more impressive. Dealing with that kind of pressure is not easy, and many other young, great athletes have failed trying to live up to the hype. So there was an article in the New York Times this week that really stuck out to me. It was written by Matthew Futterman, and it talked about how academies in tennis, like IMG, are now being forced to invest in athletes that are as young as 10 years old, or maybe even younger than that. The article talks about a bunch of different things, but the summary is this. There's been an increase in tennis academies throughout Europe, and these tennis academies, like IMG, are now being forced to compete for these athletes at an even younger age. Why? Because the bidding has increased. Typically, these academies would offer about $50,000 in annual costs to cover for travel, coaching, and more. But now, athletes are getting paid even more than that. And since the hit rate for success is so low on some of these players given their age, IMG can't afford to pay that much more money for each individual athlete. Instead, now they're being forced to invest in younger players. We're talking pre-teens, in hopes of finding the next child prodigy. For example, IMG just sent out 48 invitations for its first Future Stars Invitational tournament in Greece. It's a week-long tournament, an education retreat for players that are 12 years old and younger, including their chaperones, parents, and coaches. Now, IMG may be looking at younger athletes than ever before, but I think it's important to clarify, this isn't an entirely new concept. Take Maria Sharapova, for example. IMG signed her when she was just 11 years old, and they gave her $50,000 every year until she was 17. That $300,000 investment might have helped her earn nearly $350 million in prize money, sponsorships, and endorsements throughout her career. So who knows what would have happened with Maria Sharapova if she was not given the financial resources from IMG? Would she have turned $300,000 into $350 million? So that's obviously a win, both for Maria Sharapova and IMG. But ultimately, I think extrapolating this approach to a younger generation of athletes could have severe repercussions. We have plenty of data and testimonials at this point that show putting too much pressure on an athlete at too young of an age can have the opposite impact, damaging their mental health and ultimately putting them in a worse position than they were before. I think this is something worth keeping an eye on, and I certainly don't think that it should continue the way it is today.